Hello my friends and welcome to the channel. So in today's video I want to show you how you can send emails, automated emails or whatever kind of emails from your MERN stack application. And a typical use case for that will be maybe if you have a login and a registration system and you want users to be able to reset their password via email. So for example, I have this form here, and if I enter my email and click on get reset password, an email will be sent to that email. Right, so that's a typical use case. But then even if you have just a regular contact form and you want users to be able to fill in some details on the form and then send that email somewhere, this is still applicable to that. Now this project you see here is even part of my MERN course that I'm going to publish this week. So if that's something you want to get early access to, then just go to my website, which I'll leave a link in the description, ZinoTrustAcademy.com, and then just enter your email and I will send you a discount link when the course is published sometime this week. Also, if you want to check out some of my courses, I build JavaScript based courses from JavaScript to React, and they are mostly project based, so you can check that out. Also, I'll leave discount links for all my courses. So now let's get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize this a little bit, and then I'll just create a new fresh project that I'll use for this tutorial. So I'll just right click and then I'll create a new folder, which I am going to call, okay, so new folder, and I'm just going to call that folder send email. So send email, like so, and hit enter. Now inside of this folder is where we're going to build our full stack application, and I don't even know why this stuff is deciding to hang today. Anyway, no problem. I'll just right click and then I'll open with Visual Studio Code. All right, so I have the folder open right here. So when I build full stack application, I like to start from the back end. So what I got to do here is I'll just create a new folder inside of this guy and I'll call it Backend, and that's where everything that has to do with my backend is going to be, right? Okay, so next I'm going to open my terminal, and inside of my terminal I'm going to install the dependency that I will need to create a backend, and I'm going to be doing that with Node.js and Express. So first off, before we do anything, let's make sure we are inside of this backend folder. So I'll just come here and I'll say cd, which means change directory, and then I'll just say backend. So let me just type back and hit the tab key, and then I'll just hit enter. So you see here I am inside of the backend folder. Now I'm going to install some of the dependencies that I need to just create a small backend. So you know what I got to do? I'll first say, okay, you know what, let me create a file inside this guy first. So I'll create a file and I'll just call that file server.js. So this is the root file for our backend. Now inside of this guy here, first off, I'm going to initialize this with npm. So I'll say npm and I'll say init, and I want all the answers to be -y. So I'll just answer yes and hit enter. What that will do is it will create a package.json file for this particular project. And without your package.json file, you will not be able to install packages from Node Package Manager. So that's basically what we're trying to set up here. Fine. Now let's go ahead and continue. So to install the packages we need, I will say npm and install, and then I'll just list all the packages. So the first one is Express, which is just the Node.js framework. Then I will install Node Mailer. So that should be Node Mailer, like so. I'll give a space, and I also want to install this package they call Body Parser. Body. What am I doing? Body Parser. I also need one more, okay, two more actually, cores. And don't worry, I'll say what they do much later. Let me just install them first. Cores, and I need the last one is which one do I need? Okay, I just cannot remember. Okay, .env. So .env, yeah, and then I'll hit enter. So this will just help us to set up at least a reasonably standard backend for our project. While I'm doing this, right, I also want to start installing React on the front end. So you know what I'm going to do? I would create another, okay, let me just wait for this to finish so that I don't run into any sort of error. Oh, so I got an error here because one of the dependencies I wanted to install doesn't exist. In other words, I did not, type it out well. So technically it's body hyphen parser. That's how I should have written it out here. All right, so I'll just go ahead and install it. Hopefully I don't have any other error. All right, so my installation is complete, and if you look inside our package.json file, you see here that we have all the dependencies we installed, and everything is running just fine. There's one more dependency I probably have already installed on my machine globally, and that is nodemon. So if you say npm install nodemon and then you add -g flag, it will install nodemon on your computer, so that whenever you want to build out a MERN stack, you don't have to install nodemon on every project. You can just refer to it. So if you don't have nodemon globally installed, you can just do this. But if you don't even want to install it globally, just want to install it for this particular project, then you just say -d and it's just install it as a dev dependency. All right, let's go on. And like I said, I also want to install React while I work on the back end, so that I'll just save time. So here I'll just come here and say npm, sorry, not npm, I would say npx create React app. So create React hyphen app, and I'll just call the name of that app Frontend, so that it will create a folder where that is going to name front end. So basically, technically, I'll just have a backend folder and a front end folder, which is how I really like to set up things. So just go ahead and hit enter, and then that's going to start installing, and then we can now come and work on our back end. So you know what I'm going to do to save time? I'll just paste in the basic setup for our application here. All right, so I've been able to just quickly paste in just a basic template of the backend setup. Let me just go through it. So I imported my .env, express, cores, and body parser, and I instantiated my express app using this variable. So const app equal to express, and then I called it. Then I added this middleware that will enable us to work with JSON when we work on this project. Then I added my port number. So if I'm launching this app to the server, then it will look for the port number on the server, or if I'm launching it in this locally, it will just point to port 5000. Then I'm just listening here, app.listen, and then when I start my server, it will just run this, it will just log this to the console, server running on port whatever number. Yeah, so basically what we want to do is we want to test this setup to make sure that our basic server is working. So for us to do that, we're going to use a command, and just to make it a little bit easier for us to run our back end, or to start our back end, I'm going to create a script for that. And okay, we already have this start script that says node and server.js, but what I want to use is nodemon. Remember, I installed nodemon globally and I showed you how you can do that. So nodemon server.js, and that will be the start command. So if I go ahead and save this, I think at this point we are good to test our application. Okay, there's one thing though, I did not call this cores. So let me quickly call that. I'll just come here and say app.use, and then I'll just open my, it's a middleware by the way, and I'll open my brackets here and just add cores, and then I'll just call it. All right, so that's it basically. So let's go ahead and save this file, and then let's test our server, or let's fire up our server. I'll come here and say npm start, okay, and then I'll hit enter. Let's, fingers crossed, let's see if it fires up the server. All right, so you can see here we have server running on port 5000, which means that we've properly set up our server. So now we can go ahead and write the backend code for sending emails. Because I like to keep things organized, inside of this my backend folder, I'm going to create another folder, and I'll just call that utils, like so. And then inside of this utils folder, that's where I'll now create the body of function that will send an email. I'll create a file and I'll call that file send email, yeah, like so .js. All right, now inside of this file, this is where we're going to add the logic that will help us send email. All right, so to send an email, we're going to need node mailer. So first off, let's import it. So I'll say const and I'll call it node mailer, and that's going to be equal to, in this one we're using common.js. all right, it's not like ES6 where we say import. So node mailer, and we're going to say require, let's open our bracket, and inside of our quotes we're now going to say the name of the package, which is node mailer as well. Great. Now I'll create a function actually. So here, let me just create an arrow function. I have shortcut for all sort of things. I'm going to call this function send email, like so, and it's going to be an asynchronous function. So here I'll say async in the front of this guy here. See, it's an asynchronous arrow function. Now whenever we want to send an email using node mailer or regular sending an email, what are the items that needs to be in place? So the first is the subject. So let me come here and say subject. So I'm going to add this as a parameter. So subject. What else? Well, we need to have a message we're sending. So message. Then we need to have the email of the person we want to send to. So here I'm just going to say send underscore to. That's what I'll represent that as. Then next, we need to know there needs to be an email that we're sending it from. Okay, and this should be sent to, sent to is fine, and then the next one will be sent underscore from. Then lastly, if we want to specify like maybe a different email that we want the user to reply to, then we can also add that. So I'm just covering all the bases here. It's not like we're always going to need that reply to part. So here I'll just say reply underscore to. All right, so these are the possible information we need when we want to send an email to like a person. So now that we've written out the structure of this guy here, what we need to do is we need to create what is known as a transporter. Transporter is just which service do you want us to use to send this email. That's what it is. All right, so here I'll come and say const and I'll call it transporter, like so, and that's going to be equal to, let's open we're going to use this node mailer here, this variable we created, or this import we made here. We're going to use it to create a transporter. So I'll say node mailer dot create transporter. So you see, create transport, that's actually the word. So in this one, we're going to now add an object. This object is going to have all the details about the service we want to use to send that email. So let me just do that quickly. So here I'm just going to say host. So that's the first information, and you know what, let me just add a dummy host. For example, I'll just say process.env okay, dot, I'll call this email host. So email underscore host. Now I actually know that I've not created this variable yet in any env file, but I just want to fill in the information here. Then we'll go ahead and create these variables later. So we need a host, then we need a port, and this information, I'd like you to know that it's coming from the service that we're going to use, and we're going to see that shortly. So for me, I'm going to use what's it called, Hotmail, okay, or Outlook. I'm going to use Outlook. So let me just finish this up quickly. So I'll just grab this guy and then I'll paste that here like this, and this one is going to be, or let me just actually just type it in. So this is going to be 587 according to the documentation. Then we're now going to create another variable called, or another property in this object called auth. So this auth is going to contain the user details, username and password of the service we are using. So here we're going to say user, and I'm just going to say process.env/email user. Okay, user, like so. And we've not created this variable yet, but we'll create it. And the last one here is going to be password. Oh, so there needs to be a comma here, so let me quickly add that. So this is now going to be pass, small letter by the way. Then this is process.env, and I'll just call it email pass. Okay, now this is actually enough for us to send an email, but because we are sending from a local environment and I just want to mitigate any kind of possible errors that may result, I'm going to add another property. It's called TLS. It's just a security protocol here. So TLS, and I will say reject unauthorized, and I'll set that to false. Now what this means is if you look very carefully, when we launch this application, it's not going to be HTTPS, it's going to be HTTP. All right, that's not a secure protocol. So basically what we are saying is that, look, just be a little bit lax on the security and authorization for sending this email. It's not necessary, you don't need it, like it can still work without this guy, but I'm just trying to mitigate any possible errors that may occur on your end so that you don't have to stress yourself too much with fixing errors. That's basically what I'm doing here. So now that I've created this transporter, the next thing we need to do is to create what is known as options to send this email. So I'm just going to come down here and then I'll just say const, and I'll say options. Some people can like to call it email options, but options is fine actually. So options, and that's going to be equal to an object. So this object, then we are going to specify everything here. We're going to just add them there. So we're going to come down, and here I'll say from. So I'm sending the email from, and then I'll just point to this sent from. So I'll come here and say sent underscore from. I'll add a comma and then to. Then I'll say sent to underscore to, add a comma, and then I would set the reply to. This time is going to be capital letter, so reply to, and then we're going to set it to the parameter we used up there, reply to. Next, we're going to add the subject, and we're going to set that to the subject. And lastly, let me add a comma here. Lastly, we're going to have this time I want to send a HTML based message, and then I'll just point that to the message. So you notice that everything on the right of this, the properties here, they are coming from this guy. Oh, this send to didn't quite take. So did I make a mistake? Oh, it's send to. Okay, yeah, so that's it. So these are the options we're going to, need to be in place for us to send, the email. Now let's come down here finally and send the email. So I'll add a comment here and say send email. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to point from this transporter. So I'll come down here and say transporter dot send email, send mail actually. So send mail, and let's open that up, and let me just open it up like this. So it's going to take a number of parameters. So the first parameter it's going to take is this options. So these are the values we already have there. So I'll just come here and say options like so. Then it's now going to have a function. Okay, I think I didn't even do this well. I didn't do it properly. So let me just get rid of this guy first. Okay, so options. Then inside here, we're just going to use a regular function. So function, and this function is going to have two parameters. It's going to have an error parameter. So if, for example, we try to send an email and there's an error, that error will be saved in this error parameter. Then it's going to have an info parameter. When the send email process is successful, then we're going to have everything saved in the info parameter. So now I can now come here and open this up. So you see what's happening here. Lastly, I'll now add an if else statement for both the error and the success case. So I'll say if there is an error, let me open that up. Basically, I'll just log that error to the console just to save time. You can do whatever you want with the error. So I'll just say error. Okay, so let me come down. Else, that's in other words, if there is no error, it means that it was successful. I'll log the info to the console. And remember, I said that the message and everything will be saved in the info. So I'll just log that to the console. So technically, we've been able to create the function that will send this email. And you know the good thing about this function, this send email function, it's usable, it's reusable from different parts of our application. So that's why I like doing it like this. So now the last thing we need to do is to just export this so that we can use it in any part of our application. How do we do that? We're going to say module.export like so, and then exports plural, and then it's just going to be equal to the name of the function, which is send email. That's all. So now we can use this function anywhere in our application. And let me just take a second look to make sure that everything is okay here. And I'm fully aware of the fact that because we have here 6, I don't have to say subject HTML, but I just left it like this because the others are not the same, so I didn't want to confuse you guys. So let's yeah, so we can go ahead and save. So I'll go ahead and save this file, and then I will now create my .env file so that I can add the parameters of all these guys here: email user, email host, and stuff like that. Great. So I'll come here to the left inside of my backend, and I'll create my .env file. Okay, so now this .env file is now going to have this. Let me come here. It's going to have the email host, email user, and email password, the 3 of them. So I'll copy that, and then I'll come here, and then I'll just paste the email host and set that to be equal to. So let me paste that like so, and this one is going to be email user, and the last one is going to be email pass. All right, so where is this information going to come from? Well, this one is actually straightforward. This one, so for this our email host, we're simply just going to, not using quotes, we're simply just going to paste in smtp-mail.outlook.com. so it's an Outlook mail that we're going to use. All right, so to show you what that is, we're just going to go to our browser. Maybe I should minimize this guy. Okay, so this browser here, if you look, I have an Outlook email that I use. So this is my own Outlook email. So you're going to have a username and a password. If you don't have an Outlook email, just go ahead and create an Outlook email. So outlook.live.com, and just create an email. Okay, great. So let's come back here, and I'm just going to paste in my username and password, and of course I'm not going to show you that so that you know you don't use mine. So go ahead and create yours and then use yours. All right, so now that I've made some changes to my .env file, what I need to do is I need to close my server, like close it and then restart it so that it can pick those changes from the .env file. All right, next I'll come to my server.js and I'm going to create a route. So I'll just come here, let me add a comment here and say route, and just to keep things very simple, I'll just create a home route. So here I'll just say app.get, and I got to open parentheses, and the first thing I'll specify is the path for the route. So it's just going to be /, which is home. Then I'm going to add a callback function that's going to have a request and a response object. Open that up like this with an arrow function, and then I'll just say response.send. So I just want to send a simple text, and I'll just say home page like so. So this is the home route. Let's just make sure that you know what we are working on is actually well. So I'll just come to my browser here and just test it here in my browser. So I will come here and just say localhost. Come on, help me out. So localhost 5000, and that's the home route. So all things being equal, we should get a text on the okay, great. So you see we have home page. So that means that we have properly set up our route on that port, localhost 5000. However, what we're going to use to test out this functionality is a software called Postman. We're not going to use our browser. So if I bring in this software here, this is Postman. So you can just quickly download it. We can test out our API here. So here I have localhost 5000. So let me just delete this guy, and let me just change this to get. So get request and localhost 5000. If I send this, I'm still going to get the home page right here in the Postman, and I definitely prefer Postman to sorry, I prefer Insomnia to Postman. So this is Insomnia, not Postman. Sorry about the use of terms. All right, so now let's create a route that will help us send an email. So you know what I got to do? I'll just duplicate this route to save time. And this time it's not going to be a get route, it's going to be a post route. So app.post, and then the path is going to be /API / anything you want. So here I'm just going to say send mail or send email, whatever, send email. Then it's going to have a request response. Now this one I'm going to make it asynchronous, so async in front of this callback function. And then of course I don't just want to do response.send, so let's delete that. Now technically what I want us to be able to achieve is to be able to get the email that we want to send to from the front end of our application. So it's going to be in the body of the front end. So request.body is what's going to catch that. So here I'll just say const, and then I'll just destructure any email that comes from the request.body. Okay, now this is going to be confusing if you've not built a full stack application before, but if you have some experience with MERN stack, then this should not be confusing. So now that we've been able to destructure the body, I'm just going to come here and add a try catch block. So try catch, and in the try block this is where I'm going to try to send the email. So what are the parameters or the arguments now, because this is where we're calling the send email function. So let me just say send, sorry, I'll say okay, just a minute. So here I'll say await, because this is asynchronous, await send email. Good. So this is the function to send an email, and I need to import it. So let me import it from, okay, import. I think I have to manually import it. Oh, okay, it's already here. Oh, that's why. So I've imported it. So now when we want to send an email, remember there are 5 things we need: the subject, the message, who we are sending to, who we are sending from, and if we want to reply to a special email address. Otherwise to just default reply to who you sent that email to. You understand? So let's just come back here to our server, and I'm just going to specifically define all of those parameters. So the first thing is, let me just say, who am I sending to? So I'll say const send _to, and that's just going to be set to, so I want to send to this email that I'm getting from the body. So I'll just set that to the email that I get from the body, and then I'll close. Let me just give some space here. Then the next is, who am I sending from? So send from, yeah, and that's going to be the email service provider. So you remember that Outlook email that I created or that I have, that's what I'm going to send from, and it's in my process.env file. So process.env I think what I call it, email user. Okay, yeah, email user, email _user. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to have a test.env file to show you what I already have in my env file. So let me do that quickly. So technically .env.example is just a file I created to show you what your .env file should look like. So I have the email host, the email user, which is this guy, and then the email password. All right. So that's basically it. Okay, so let's come back here, right? So we have the send to, we have the send from, which is the email user, in which case is my email. Then let me do my reply to. So I want to reply to reply _to, and this one I just simply want to be able to reply to the person that sent the email. So email, then any other thing, subject and message. So const subject, and that's just going to be equal to something. So here let me just say thank you message. Then lastly we're going to have the message, so I'll say const message, and that's just going to be equal to, now I'm going to use backticks because I want to add HTML inside. So simple message, I'll just add h3 there, and then I'll say hello Zino, and then let me just add a paragraph and say maybe thank you for your tutorial, thanks for your YouTube tutorials. All right, so you just try and send something reasonable so that the email does not reject, or maybe if you are sending to Gmail now, you just send just one word, they may just flag it as a spam. All right, so P, I'll just say regards. Okay, so this looks reasonable enough. So now that I've written out all the parameters that I need, I can then come here and add them. So just to save time, you know what I'll just do? I'll just copy them and just paste them in. So inside of this send mail, I'll just paste in. So we need a subject, a message, who we are sending to, who we are sending from, and who we are replying to. Now this reply to is not compulsory. If you don't set it, it will just default to who you are sending to. All right, so something is wrong. Okay, this should be sent from. So yeah, so this is basically what we need. So now after you've sent the email, and if everything works well, then let's send a response. So response dot, first of all, I'll add a status to just say 200 that it was successful, or it was okay. Then I will now say maybe response.json. So let me send a message back to the front end, and that message I'll just send an object, and in that object I'll set the success property just to show that it was successful. SUCCESS. Yeah, I'll set that to true. Then I'll now send a message, and that message is simply just going to be email sent. So it's text that will say email sent. All right, great. Now what if there is an error? Well, I'll just quickly do a response dot, and I'll set a status of 500, so server error. Then I would send a message, so the JSON, and you know what, I'll just send the error dot message, error dot message. So for you, you may want to do something else. You may want to send something more structured. So technically, this is what we need to send an email, I think. And what we need to do now is to just test out this stuff we've done so far, if it works. All right, we spent so much time on this already. So I'll just come to, first of all, I'll save it, and then I'll come down here to Insomnia. And then this is it, localhost port 5000 /API / I think it was send email. Yeah, so that's the route, this guy here. Let me close this up a little bit. All right, great. So technically, if we fire this off, the only problem is that we're not getting any email from the body, so we're going to have an issue with that. So what I need to do is, you see this send to, I need to actually hard code an email here. So I'll just hard code my email, Donald Z. Okay, so just hard code an email, and this one as well. So let me copy this guy and also paste that here. Oh shit. Copy that guy and paste that here. Great. So now, fingers crossed, this should work if we don't have any bug in our code. I'll save that, and let's come here and test it out. So it's just to fire off this email, or this function here. All right, fingers crossed. I'm gonna send it now. Send. Oh, okay, so there's a problem here. It says 404, this route was not found. That's because we use the get instead of the post. So I'll just change this to post. And you know what, just to keep things the way they were, I'll just do Ctrl+Z and just have my email there and save this guy. Then I'll just put my email here in the body of this postman here. So what I'm gonna do is I'll click here and I'll just say JSON, and then let's just simply add an email here just to keep things simple. So here we're just going to add the email, and we're just going to add the email property. So email, it's going to be inside what's it called, quotes. So email, and then we're just going to set that to the email we want. So Donald Z.ng. Aha, so this is the email I use for testing. So I'll go ahead and save this and send, or rather, so let's fire this and see. Aha, so you see, success, true, email sent. Now, moment of truth, let's go and check our email to see if it actually sent or if it got delivered. So I'll open this guy up, and I have the Donald Z opened here. I'll go back there, and then I'll just refresh it. Oh, I think that it just entered my phone now. So I'll refresh it. It's loading. Aha, voila. So you see, this email is from Node Course, and it's a thank you message. So if I open it up here, you'll see that we have thank you for your YouTube tutorials, regards. All right, so now we've been able to send the email successfully from this our testing server, or Postman API testing. What we want to do is we want to be able to send it from the front end of our application, and thank God we've already installed the front end. So I'll just go ahead and just build a simple form and then send it quickly. So let's come here and go to the front end of our application, which is this guy here, front end. Okay, so I can close this up and then open this up. Yeah, so in this front end, I will need my own special terminal for that. So this terminal here, I'll say cd into the front end. Come on, be fast. Okay, so I'm in the front end now, and now that I'm in the front end, let me just clean up the front end a little bit. So in the app.js, let's come here to the app.js. Aha, so instead of having all this plenty bagadash, I'll just have just a simple div that will just maybe say hello world inside, just, you know. And I think that's it for now. I'm not using the logo, I'm not using the app CSS. I'll just delete that, save, and then let's run this npm start from the front end so that it can launch the front end. So npm start. Aha, so I'll hit enter and then just wait for it to open inside of this guy here, the browser. All right, so technically we have our hello world open here. Now what I want to do is I already have this template, CSS template, that I already, you know, use for my tutorials and projects, even personal projects. This is it here, React starter template. So I'll just copy the index.css file just to make my work a little bit easier or a little bit faster. So I'll copy that index.css file, and I'll leave a link in the description to that as well. And then I'll just replace everything in this index.css file here. Control A, I'll delete it, and then I'll just paste that in, and then I'll save. All right, so you can do the same, grab the CSS file, and then we'll just, you know, be fast with this stuff. So in our app.js, I'll create just a very simple form. So let's start with this div. I'll give it a class name of, I have this special class that I used to center everything. I call it center all. Then I also want this whole page to have a background of blue, so that's primary. Then lastly, I want it to have a what's it called, height of 100% of the viewport height. Then what do I want? Maybe I'll just create another div, and this one is just going to have a class of, let me just, you know, create a div first, and then I'll give it a class of, I'll set the width to, sorry, so dash dash. For my utility classes, I use 2 dashes in front of them. So width of 500 px. Then I also want it to have a card property. Then lastly, maybe some padding around it. Then I want the background, so dash dash bg hyphen light. So that's going to give it a white background. Inside of it is where I will now create a form that will have a class of dash dash form control. That will just make my input just a little bit nice. It's not going to have any action here, so let me just remove that. And then inside the form, we're going to have an input. The input is going to be a type of email, because remember, it's just the email we need from the front end, remember. So it's going to have a value of email, which we've not created, and it's going to have an onChange. onChange is going to be set to, so here let's create an arrow function, give it an e, and then I'll say set email, which we've also not created, and this is going to be event.target.value. Now before we go too far, let's just quickly, or maybe I'll add a placeholder. So let's just quickly create, so let's just say placeholder, and that's just going to say email. So now let's quickly create that state that we are using here. So here I'll just say use state, and I'll just use the snippet, and then I'll just call this email. So lastly, we're going to make this capital letter, you know, the way things go here in React. then I'll make this an empty string. Now don't forget that we need to import useState from React, so auto import that. And now the last thing we need to do here is we need to add a button. So button, and I have some classes for my button, so dot dash dash btn, and then I'll just say dot dash dash btn primary blue, and then I'll just tap that, and the button will just say send email. Okay, and then let me just give this button a type of submit, so type of submit, but that's what it's doing. So let me save this guy and let's see what we have on the page. Hopefully all things all right. So this is what we have on the page, and I think the what's it called, the 500 pixel width is too much, but I'm sure you get the point. Let's see, center all, and then oh, this is not what I wanted it, this is not how I wanted it to look, but no problem, let's just continue. So well, maybe I'll just change this center all here. I'll just give it a different class. I'll call it flex hyphen center, and I think that should just fix this. So this is a lot better. Great. So now what do we want to happen when we submit this form? Well, I'll add an onSubmit to the form. I'll say onSubmit, and I'll set that to be equal to send email. All right, so now let's create this function, because the function we've not created. So I'll just come here, and under this my state here, I'll just create an arrow function that I'm going to call send email, and it's also going to be asynchronous, so async, and then I'll just open that up. So first off, we want to be able to get the email from the function. Anyway, we already know the email, so let's just come here and start with the basics. I'll prevent this form from reloading, so e dot prevent default, which is going to prevent the form from reloading the page. That's the basics. Then I will now use Axios. Now I've not installed Axios, so I'm going to have to install that very quickly. So I'll come here, create a new terminal, and then I'll just install Axios from that new terminal. Come on, help me out. All right, so let's cd first into the front end, and then I'll just say npm install Axios, and then I'll hit enter. I'll wait for this to install, and then we'll complete the project. Well, so let me just keep things simple here and just make sure that I have access to the email. That's the email state. So I'll just log the email to the console like so, and then I'll just save that, just so that we can at least test as we move along. Let me do F12 to open console here, and then I'll just check. I'll just type something here. Oh, what's going on here? Okay, I think maybe this was from before. So I'll come here and say maybe Donald. Let me just say Donald, and then just click send email. Oh, it needs to be an email. So donald@gmail.com, and then send. So you see we have access to the state, and we can manipulate and use it from now on. So now let's come here. I think Axios has finished installing, so we can use Axios from here now. So first off, I gotta come here. I don't need this guy, so I'll just delete it. I'll create an object. I'll say const. I'll call that object data. That's because we want to be able to send that email as a piece of data back to the back end. So I'll open that, data equals an object, and then inside I'm just going to add the email. All right, now we can now go ahead and use Axios to send. So here I'll say const response is going to be equal to, and remember we made this function asynchronous, so I'm going to say await, and then I'll say Axios dot post. Remember, it's a post request. Now this post request is going to take two parameters. Actually, the first is going to be the link, which is the backend API endpoint that we are sending to. Now remember, for that we used this API endpoint here, this one. So I can actually just copy this URL here, and then that's going to be the first parameter here. So paste that in. So that's the API endpoint. Then the next piece of data or piece of argument here is going to be the email, which is this data here. So I'll just come here and say data. All right, great. And that's about it. So now let's come down here and just log the data that we get from the server back to the console. So I'll just say log, and then I'll just response dot data. That's it. So let's wait for that to response. I'm wondering why this response is red. It shouldn't be red. Let me just make sure I spelled it correctly. So response.data, and it shouldn't be red. Anyway, let me just give it a few seconds. Oh, it's red because it's outside of the function. So I've taken it back inside the function and everything is fine. So with this small setup, we should be able to send this email from the front end back to the back end of our application, and then along with the data, and then expect to get a response in our console. So what I got to do is I'll first save this guy, and I would modify that message that I'm sending from the back end. So instead of saying thank you message, I'll say thank you message from node course. All right, let's just leave it like that, and then I'll save, and then let's just test it out now. So I'll wait for this guy to fire off, and then let's come here and I would expand, because remember we're saving our response to the console. So let me just open the console, and then I'll add an actual email here. So this is going to be Donald. Aha, so that's an testing email I use. So I'll click on send. Aha, so you see here we get success in the console, which is the response from our server, and we get a success email sent. All right, so now let's go ahead and check our email to make sure that we actually got the email. I'll go back, and maybe I need to refresh it just because the email actually takes like a couple of seconds. Okay, yeah, so you see it, node course, thank you message from node course. If you open that, you see the message. So technically this is how you can send an email from your full stack application, be it an automated email or an email you want to generate from a contact form or whatever information from the front end of your website. I really do hope that you actually learned something in this project. Thank you so much. I'm going to be releasing my backend course, MERN Stack course, this week. If you want to be first to get access to a discount, make sure you visit ZinoTrustAcademy, which I'll leave a link in the description for, and then check it out, or just subscribe, and every time I release a course, I'll send you a discount. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please make sure to subscribe. I'll see you in another video. Thank you.